If you grew up in 1970s Australia, you had a childhood that simply doesn't exist anymore. Not just different, not just old-fashioned, but completely, utterly gone. It was replaced by a world so cautious, so supervised, so plugged in, that kids today would barely recognize what you lived through. The streets were yours, the creek was yours, the whole bloody suburb was your playground from the moment you left the house after breakfast until the streetlights flickered on at dusk. These are 10 Australian childhood experiences from the 1970s that have disappeared forever, and with them a kind of freedom that an entire generation took for granted and will spend the rest of their lives quietly missing. Number 1. Playing outside all day with no supervision. This is the one that defines everything. If you were a kid in the 1970s, your day had a very simple structure. You woke up, you ate breakfast, and you went outside. That was it. Nobody planned your activities, nobody booked you into programs, nobody scheduled playdates, and nobody handed you a device to keep you occupied. You just went out the front door, down the street, and off into whatever the day had to offer. Your mum might have had one instruction: be home before dark. That was the entire brief. No mobile phones, no way to check in, no tracking your location. You were just out there in the world, a kid among kids, figuring things out as you went. And the world you were figuring out was enormous. The whole street belonged to you. The park at the end of the block, the vacant lot 2 doors down where someone had left a pile of old timber that became a fort, a castle, a spaceship, depending on the day. The drain that ran behind the houses where you would catch tadpoles in summer and race sticks after rain. All of it was yours. You would gather up whoever was around, the kids from next door, the ones from up the street, maybe a younger sibling dragged along against their will. Nobody organized it. It just happened, the way kids have always organized themselves when you leave them alone long enough. You would play cricket in the street, moving every time a car came through, which was not often. You would play tiggy, brandings, kick the tin, British bulldog. You would get into arguments, sort them out, fall off things, graze your knees, and keep going. Nobody came running. Nobody needed to. The thing about that kind of freedom is what it actually taught you. Problem solving, negotiation, how to handle conflict without an adult stepping in, how to take a risk and live with the result. You were not being neglected, you were being raised in the oldest and most honest sense of the word. Today, the streets are empty. Kids are inside, supervised, scheduled, entertained. We tell ourselves it is safer. And maybe it is. But something was lost when we brought them all indoors. Something about independence, about confidence, about knowing deep in your bones that you can handle whatever the day throws at you. That was the gift of a 1970s childhood, and it is gone. Number 2. Saturday morning cartoons as a weekly ritual. Saturday morning in the 1970s was sacred. Not because anyone declared it so, but because every kid in Australia understood instinctively that Saturday morning belonged to them. You would be up before your parents, sometimes well before. You would creep out to the lounge room in your pajamas, turn the television on as quietly as you could, adjust the rabbit ears until the picture came in properly, and settle onto the carpet with your knees tucked up and a bowl of cereal balanced in your lap. And then the cartoon started. Scooby-Doo, the Flintstones, Bugs Bunny, the Jetsons, Roadrunner doing things to Wile E. Coyote that should have been disturbing but were somehow endlessly funny. These were not just shows, they were appointments. You watched them every single week in the same order at the same time because that was the only way you could see them. There was no rewinding, there was no catching up later. If you missed it, and you would have to wait a whole week. That limitation is the thing people forget now, because scarcity made it matter. Saturday morning cartoons were an event precisely because they only happened once a week, for a few hours, and then they were done. The rest of the week, you waited. The whole ritual had a physical quality to it that is hard to explain to someone who grew up with a tablet. The cold floor through your pajamas, the particular blue light of an early morning television set, the hiss of the kettle from the kitchen when your mum finally got up, the way your dad would wander through, squint at the TV, mutter something about the racket, and disappear back to bed. It was yours. That lounge room, those few hours, that ridiculous cartoon coyote falling off the same cliff over and over again. It was the beginning of the weekend, and it felt like treasure. Now kids watch whatever they want, whenever they want, on whatever screen is closest. No waiting, no ritual, no scarcity. Convenient? Absolutely. But there is no magic in it. The magic was always in the waiting. Number 3, the school tuck shop and what it meant to kids. The school tuck shop was one of the great institutions of Australian childhood. Every school had one. A small window or counter, usually run by mums who volunteered their Tuesday mornings, smelling of fresh rolls and tomato sauce, and a faint undercurrent of fried something. For a few coins, you could eat like a king. In the 1970s, the tuck shop menu was extraordinary by today's standards. Pasties, sausage rolls, golden and greasy and absolutely perfect. Meat pies with sauce that would burn the roof of your mouth if you were not careful. Finger buns with pink icing. Raspberry buns, a paper bag of hot chips if you were lucky, and icy poles in colours that existed nowhere else in nature. The whole ritual started the night before. You would ask your mum for tuck shop money, and she would fish around in her purse for the right coins, wrapping them in a small square of paper or slipping them into a little brown envelope with your order written on the outside. You would carry that envelope to school like it contained something precious, because it did. Recess was when the queue formed. You would line up, envelope clutched in your fist, shuffling forward while the smells from inside got stronger and better with every step. When you finally reached the window and handed over your envelope, the weight felt enormous. And then there it was. Your order, wrapped in paper or tucked into a brown bag, hot in your hands. The tuck shop was not just about food, it was about economy and choice, and the particular pleasure of having money and spending it the way you wanted. For a lot of kids, it was the first time they managed their own small finances. Do I get the sausage roll today or save for a pie on Friday? Real decisions with real consequences. School canteens still exist, but the soul has gone out of them. Nutrition policies, allergy considerations, health guidelines, all reasonable, all necessary, but the sausage roll dripping with sauce, the pink icing on the finger bun, the joy of something slightly terrible for you, that is gone. And the kids who queue up today have no idea what they are missing. Number 4, riding in the back of a ute with the dog. This one's illegal now, and when you say it out loud, you understand why. But if you grew up in the 1970s, chances are you spent a meaningful portion of your childhood in the back of a ute, wind in your hair, dog beside you, watching the road disappear behind you, while the adults sat in the cab completely unconcerned. It was standard, completely unremarkable. Going out to a relative's property for the weekend, kids in the back. Trip to the hardware store, kids in the back. Long drive out into the country, kids in the back with a collie or a kelpie, both of you squinting into the wind, both of you absolutely beside yourselves with the joy of it. There was no safety equipment. There were no seatbelts in the tray, no roll bar, no padding. You held on when the road got rough, and that was the sum total of the safety protocol. When the ute hit a pothole, you'd bounce and scramble and laugh and grab the dog for balance. When it went around a bend, you'd all slide together. It was chaotic and brilliant. The sensory experience of it stays with you forever. The smell of exhaust and dust and dog. The particular roar of wind at highway speed. The way the sunlight hit differently when you were up high and exposed. The landscape rolling out in every direction, nothing between you and all of it. You felt enormous out there, big and free and part of something vast. Dad would tap the back window occasionally, maybe to check you were still there, maybe just because. And you'd grin and give him a thumbs up and he'd nod and keep driving. Your kids will never have that. Your grandkids will never have that. The law changed, the world changed, and the back of a ute became a place for tools and equipment rather than children and dogs. It makes sense. But something undeniably wonderful went with it. Something about the rawness of childhood, the wind and the speed and the uncomplicated happiness of going somewhere with your family and your dog and the whole wide sky above you. Number 5, getting the cuts at school. There are some things from the 1970s that we changed because they needed changing, and corporal punishment in schools is firmly in that category. But if you were a kid during that era, the cane or the strap was simply part of the landscape. It was real, it was known, and it shaped the way you moved through school in ways both obvious and subtle. Every school had a teacher who wielded it. Sometimes it was the headmaster, a word that carried genuine weight. You would hear footsteps in the corridor and know, by their pace and their weight, whether today was going to be a problem. The cane itself lived in a drawer or hung on a hook, usually visible, a permanent reminder. Getting the cuts meant being sent out of class, walking down the hallway with that sick feeling in your stomach, knocking on the headmaster's door, and waiting. The waiting was almost worse than anything that followed. Then you would hold out your hand or bend over, depending on the school, and it was done. The thing is, nobody talked about it much. You came back to class, sat down, did not meet anyone's eyes, and got on with it. Other kids might catch your eye and give a small nod. That was the extent of the sympathy on offer. You were expected to absorb it and move on, and you did. Whether it worked as a deterrent is debatable. Plenty of kids got the cuts regularly and wore it as a badge of honor. Plenty more were so terrified of it that the fear became its own kind of damage. Australia phased out corporal punishment in schools state by state through the 1980s and the 1990s. By the time the last states came around, it already felt like a relic. Today, it is almost incomprehensible that it was ever standard practice. But for kids who grew up in the 1970s, it was just Tuesday. A shadow that hung over every classroom, every corridor, every miscalculated decision. Number 6, buying mixed lollies for 10 cents at the corner store. This might be the most purely joyful entry on this list. If you grew up in the 1970s in Australia, you know exactly what 10 cents from your mum could become in the right hands at the right counter. The corner store had a lolly section. Not a display, not a shelf. A section. Usually glass jars lined up along the counter or across a low shelf, each one filled with a different treasure. Milk bottles, clinkers, jelly babies, cobbers, fantails with the movie star wrappers, red skins, long and chewy and vaguely jaw-destroying, spearmint leaves, musk sticks in that particular pink that existed only in musk sticks and nowhere else in the universe. You'd press your face against the glass and you'd point. That one, 3 of those, 2 of those ones. And the shopkeeper, usually someone who'd been behind that counter for years and who knew every kid in the neighborhood on sight, would count them out into a small white paper bag, twist the top and hand it over. 10 cents. 10 cents bought you a bag of assorted brilliance. You'd ration them on the walk home, or more likely you wouldn't ration them at all. You'd eat 3 before you'd even left the shop, feel vaguely regretful, and then eat 3 more. It didn't matter. They were yours. You chose them yourself, one by one, and that made them perfect. The corner store itself is mostly gone now, swallowed by convenience chains and supermarkets. And the lollies still exist, technically, in bags on shelves with used by dates and barcodes and no one helping you choose. But the ritual of it, the pointing and the counting and the small white paper bag twisted at the top, that's gone. That was childhood in 10 cents worth of joy, and nothing has replaced it. Number 7, Summer holidays with no plans and no screens. 6 weeks. 6 whole weeks of absolutely nothing. That's what summer holidays meant if you were a kid in the 1970s. School finished on a Friday afternoon. You walked out those gates, and 6 unplanned, unsupervised, gloriously shapeless weeks stretched out in front of you like the longest gift imaginable. No agenda, no itinerary, just time and plenty of it. There was no holiday program, no structured activities booked weeks in advance, no camps unless you'd done something to deserve it. Your parents were not your entertainment directors, and they never pretended to be. They had houses to run, jobs to get to, lives to live. The idea that children needed to be occupied and stimulated and scheduled every single day of the summer break simply did not exist. You'd figure it out. You always did. That was the whole point. The days had a quality that's almost impossible to describe to someone who grew up differently. Long and hot and completely shapeless. The first week, you'd sleep in until 9, eat cereal in front of the television, and feel vaguely like royalty. The second week, you'd start ranging further from the house, finding out what was happening on the next street, at the park, down at the Oval. By the third week, you'd have a whole circuit established. The pool in the morning, because it opened at 8 and the water was still cold and the queue wasn't too bad if you timed it right. The creek in the afternoon, once the heat had settled into something serious. The neighbour's backyard trampoline if you could negotiate your way into it, which usually involved tolerating their younger sibling for at least an hour. You made it work. And you learned things during those weeks that no program, no camp, no structured activity could ever teach you. You learned how to manage boredom, which is genuinely one of the most underrated skills a human being can develop. You learned how to invent something to do from nothing, how to sustain a game across 3 days, how to disappear into a project or a fantasy world that lived entirely in your own head and needed nothing from anyone else to keep going. 6 weeks of that built something in you, something quiet and self-reliant that stayed. The heat was part of it too. The particular, absolute, merciless heat of an Australian summer that you felt in your feet on the concrete and your shoulders under a cloudless sky. Sprinklers on the front lawn, a garden hose stretched as far as it would reach, a towel laid flat on the hot path because the grass was too dry to sit on, the smell of sunscreen and chlorine and cut grass drying in the afternoon. And then, as the day finally started to ease, that specific barbecue smoke drifting over the fence from somewhere nearby, which meant it was evening, which meant snags, which meant another long day had used itself up beautifully. Today, kids are booked into activities from the first day of holidays to the last. Supervised, scheduled, entertained, accounted for. They never hit the bottom of boredom, that particular productive silence where something genuinely new gets invented. We called it doing nothing, it was actually everything. Number 8, the whole family watching one TV show together. In the 1970s, television was a shared experience in a way that is genuinely impossible to recreate now. There was one TV in the house. One. It sat in the lounge room, and whatever was on it, everyone watched together because there was no alternative and nowhere else to go. This sounds like a limitation, and it was. But limitations have consequences that are not always bad. Sunday night was the big one. After dinner, the whole family would settle in. Dad in his chair, Mum on the couch with her knitting or a magazine she was not really reading, kids on the floor or squeezed in wherever they would fit. And you watched whatever Sunday night had to offer. In a Sunburned Country, The Sullivans, Homicide, Young Talent Time, whatever it was, you all watched it together, in the same room at the same time. You could not pause it. You could not rewind it. If you needed to go to the toilet, you went quickly and came back hoping you had not missed anything important. Advertisements were not something you skipped. They were something you endured, argued through, or used as an opportunity to make a cup of tea. The conversation during those shows is what you actually remember. Dad commenting on the footy, Mum recognising a guest on a variety show from years back, your little sister asking questions that nobody answered because they were too busy watching. The running commentary of a family sitting together, reacting to the same thing at the same time. That shared reaction is the thing that is gone. Not just from television, but from culture generally. We do not watch the same things anymore. We all watch something different, alone, on a different screen, in a different room. We are more connected than ever and somehow entirely alone. The living room in the 1970s, that unremarkable gathering around a single screen, was a kind of communion, and we did not know what we had until it was gone. Number 9. Hitchhiking as a normal part of growing up. This one raises eyebrows now, and fairly so. The world is different, and the risks are real and documented. But in the 1970s in Australia, hitchhiking was a standard feature of youth. Not a desperate last resort, not a reckless adventure, just a normal way of getting somewhere when you did not have a car. You would stand on the road out of town with your thumb out and you would wait. Usually not long. Someone would pull over, you would wind down the window, have a quick conversation, decide you were comfortable and get in, and then you would go. You might ride 100 kilometres without paying a cent, talking to farmers, truckers, travelling families, other kids doing the same thing. You would end up in places you had not planned on. You would meet people you never would have met any other way. Teenagers did it to get home from parties when no one could pick them up. Young blokes did it to get between towns for work. University students did it to travel across the country without spending money they did not have. It was just part of the mobility of youth. A social compact that meant adults would move a young person down the road, and that was simply what you did for each other. The change did not happen overnight. Through the 1980s, a handful of high-profile cases changed the cultural conversation, and the trust that underpinned hitchhiking began to dissolve. Parents started warning their kids. The warnings became fear, and gradually the thumb by the roadside disappeared. Today, you would struggle to find a young person who hitchhikes routinely, and you would be hard-pressed to find many adults who would stop without a second thought. The social compact is gone. We do not make that agreement with strangers anymore. It is rational, but it cost us something. A particular kind of mobility, a particular kind of trust, a particular kind of story that belongs to a specific Australia that no longer exists. Number 10. Roaming the bush, creeks and paddocks unsupervised. Save the best for last. This one is the heart of it. This is the experience that sits at the centre of what it meant to grow up in 1970s Australia, and it is the one that is furthest from reach now. You had a creek, or a bush reserve, or a paddock out the back of a friend's place where the grass was long and the trees made shade, and the whole world dropped away the moment you were in it. You went there regularly, without adults. Just you and whatever ragtag collection of neighbourhood kids wanted to come along that day. You would spend hours in that creek, building dams, catching yabbies, seeing how far you could go before you lost your footing on the slippery rocks. You would fall in regularly. You would come home wet and muddy and occasionally bleeding from something that did not really need to be investigated too closely. Your mum would take one look at you and direct you straight to the laundry, and that was the extent of the debrief. The bush had its own grammar that you learned slowly through exposure over years, where the snakes liked to rest on warm rocks in the afternoon, which trees had bark that peeled off in satisfying sheets, what the sky looked like through the canopy of a stringy bark, the sound of a creek after rain versus the sound of it in dry season. You knew these things because you were there repeatedly, alone with the place, forming a relationship with it. That relationship is what has vanished most completely. Not just the access to bush and creeks, though that has diminished too, but the unsupervised time in it. The permission to be small and alone in something large and indifferent and absolutely magnificent. To figure out for yourself whether it was dangerous or safe, interesting or boring, frightening or beautiful, It was all of those things. And a child who knew that, who had sat alone in the bush long enough to feel all of those things at once, walked back into the suburb with something that cannot be taught in a classroom or downloaded from anywhere. 10 experiences, 10 losses, all of them gone. Not gone because the world turned evil or because parents stopped caring. Gone because the world genuinely changed. Risk was recalculated and safety became a primary value. Screens arrived and offered something easier than boredom. Streets that were once full of kids quietly emptied out. And somewhere in all of that, a particular kind of childhood, raw and physical and gloriously unsupervised, slipped away without anyone holding a funeral for it. The kids who lived it are in their 50s and 60s now. They raised children differently, mostly because they had to, because the world was different. But they carry it, that 1970s childhood, in their hands and their knees and their stories. In the muscle memory of riding a bike with no helmet through a summer suburb. In the smell of creek water and sunscreen and the particular heat of concrete under bare feet in January. It was yours. It shaped you. And it will never come back. So tell us, which of these takes you straight back? Which one did you live? Drop it in the comments, mate. This has been Vintage Australia, where the past is never quite as far away as it seems.